My grandfather left me his $3.5 million estate. The parents who disowned me at 18 showed up smiling, until the judge read the next page. Can you imagine being disowned by your own parents, left with nothing but the clothes on your back, only to walk into a lawyer's office years later and see those same parents staring at you like vultures, all because you just inherited a jaw-dropping $3.5 million from the only family member who ever truly cared? Yeah, that's my story. And trust me, the irony was not lost on me. So let's back up a bit. My family? Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. My parents weren't poor. They just cared way too much about appearances. Everything was a performance. My older sister, Claire, she was the golden child. Straight A's, cheerleader, never caused a peep of trouble. She could do no wrong. Me? I was the black sheep, the disappointment. I wasn't some wild rebel. I just didn't fit their perfect little mold. I liked art, not football. Books, not cars. And I had this annoying habit of, thinking for myself. For them, that was an unforgivable sin. The real cracks started showing when I hit my teens. Money, oh man, money became their favorite weapon. Claire got a brand new car for her 17th birthday. Me? Be grateful for hand-me-downs, Oliver. Her college tuition was covered, no questions asked. Mine? Figure it out yourself if you want to go. Anytime I dared to ask why things weren't equal, I'd give lectures about being a man and earning my place. My mom would just roll her eyes. Oliver, you're always so sensitive. You expect the world to hand you things. My dad? He'd just mutter about how I'd never make it without them. I'll never forget one night at dinner, he leaned across the table, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If you're still under our roof by 18, you're a failure." I laughed then, a hollow, bitter laugh, because what else could I do? But inside, I was absolutely crushed. My 18th birthday? Oh, they didn't just kick me out. They made it a production. Sat me down, told me they were cutting me off financially. It's time for you to learn the value of hard work. No money, no support, not even a safety net. I walked out of that house with a backpack, 2 changes of clothes, and a part-time job that barely covered groceries. That night, I slept in the back seat of my beat-up car. And guess what Claire was doing? Posting Instagram photos from her sorority house, flashing a shiny new MacBook and a credit card from Dad. Nice, right? The only person who didn't abandon me. My grandfather. He was my dad's father, but he was so different from the rest of them. Where my parents saw weakness, he saw potential. Where they mocked me for being quiet, he'd just say, "Oliver, that's because you think before you speak." He didn't care about the golden child nonsense. He saw me. He'd invite me over for weekends, feed me, let me crash on his couch when things got really bad. I never told him the full, ugly truth about what my parents did, but he wasn't stupid. He saw the tension. He saw me flinch when my dad's name came up. Over the years, he became more of a father to me than my actual dad ever was. Fast forward almost a decade. I'd built a modest life for myself. Nothing glamorous, just long hours, saving every penny, and keeping my distance from the family. Claire would occasionally send these smug texts about her exotic vacations, her new house, just to remind me I was still beneath her. My parents? Silence. Unless, of course, they needed something. Then I'd get a call, my mom's voice dripping with syrupy sweetness. "Oliver, honey, how are you doing?" I knew better than to fall for it. My answers were always short. I wasn't going to be their backup plan. Then came the phone call I'd both dreaded and, in a way, expected. My grandfather had passed away. It gutted me. Even though he'd been sick, I convinced myself he'd pull through. Losing him felt like losing the only real family I'd ever had. When the lawyer called about the will reading, I assumed I'd get something small, sentimental, maybe a watch. Never in a million years did I think I'd inherit anything substantial. So walking into that oak-paneled office, I froze. Sitting there, dressed like they were heading to a gala, were my parents and Claire. My mom's smile was plastered on, wide and fake. My dad's hand rested smugly on his knee. And Claire? She gave me this once-over, like she was literally calculating my worth. I wanted to turn around, run, but I forced myself into a seat. The air was thick with their forced sweetness. My mom leaned over, whispering, "Don't worry, Oliver. We'll make sure the estate is taken care of properly." My dad chimed in, "Yeah, of course. We'll manage it for you." They were already counting the money. I could see it in their eyes. They thought I was still that powerless kid they'd kicked to the curb. Then the lawyer cleared his throat, shuffled his papers, and said the words that made my heart pound. "Per the wishes of the late Mr. Harold Montgomery, his entire estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, is hereby left to his grandson, Oliver Montgomery." Time just stopped. I swear, for a split second, I saw my grandfather's smirk in my mind, like he'd been planning this moment all along. My parents' smiles froze. Claire's jaw actually dropped. Then the lawyer turned the page and said, "There are additional stipulations you'll want to hear." And that's where things took a turn none of us were prepared for. My mother was the first to snap out of it, though her voice came out too high, too sweet, like she was trying to mask pure panic. "Oh, of course that makes sense," she cooed, clapping her hands together. "Oliver was always so close to Dad, but naturally he'll need our guidance. He's inexperienced. We'll step in, won't we, dear?" She turned to my father, who nodded as if it were already decided. My dad leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Yes, Harold meant well, I'm sure. But Oliver isn't equipped to handle an estate of this size. $3.5 million? It could ruin him. It's only logical we manage the funds on his behalf." The way he said ruin him just twisted my gut. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle between them and a fortune. Claire, of course, smirked, tucking her hair behind her ear, probably already picturing herself shopping with my money. "Honestly, Oliver, don't take it the wrong way, but you've never been, well, responsible. Remember maxing out that tiny credit card freshman year?" She actually laughed, as if that one mistake defined me forever. "And Dad's right. A sudden windfall could really mess you up. Let us help." But the lawyer cut through their little performance. "If I may," he said, his voice firm, "Mr. Montgomery specified very clearly that the estate belongs to Oliver alone. No trustees, no oversight, full control." His eyes flicked to me, almost a silent message. Your grandfather knew what they'd try, but that didn't stop my parents. My mom put a hand on my arm, her nails digging slightly into my sleeve. "Oliver, sweetheart, we only want what's best for you. We can guide you, make sure you don't make mistakes. Think of it like a family effort." Grandpa would want us all to benefit. That word, benefit, hung heavy in the room. Benefit for them, not for me. I stayed quiet, trying to keep my face neutral. But inside, I was boiling. All those years of being told I wasn't enough, pushed aside for Claire, sleeping in my car while they laughed over vacation photos. And now they thought they could just swoop in and control the one thing my grandfather had left me. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about their sheer arrogance, their assumption that I couldn't possibly handle my own life without their guidance. Claire crossed her legs, leaning forward, her voice soft but dripping with condescension. "Look, Oliver, you've done fine for yourself, I guess. But this is different. You don't want to end up like those lottery winners who go broke in a year, right? I mean, come on, you're not even a homeowner. You still rent, don't you? You have no experience investing. What if you blow it all? She gave a little shrug. It just makes sense that Dad handles it. He's been managing money his whole career. What she didn't say, but I heard loud and clear, was that she still thought I was the failure, the one lagging behind, the one they could always keep under their thumb. The lawyer didn't even look up this time. Again, Mr. Montgomery's instructions are explicit. No one but Oliver is to control or manage the estate. My father's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Of course, we're just concerned, that's all. You understand, son? He said, son, like it was some term of endearment, but it felt so hollow. This was the same man who told me I'd never make it, who watched me pack my bags at 18 without offering a dime. Now, he wanted me to hand over millions out of gratitude. My mom gave a little laugh, tilting her head. Oliver, you know, we always wanted the best for you. Maybe we were tough, but look how strong you become. That was our way of preparing you. Don't hold grudges. Let's move forward as a family. I nearly choked on the hypocrisy. Preparing me? By throwing me out? By letting me struggle while they showered Claire with everything? My grandfather prepared me, not them. He taught me resilience, patience, quiet strength. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to hear every manipulative word. Let them dig their own holes. The lawyer continued, but I barely registered it. My parents were whispering, already strategizing. Claire tapped on her phone, probably texting her boyfriend about how rich she was about to become. I sat perfectly still, but inside, something was shifting. All those years of being dismissed, all those nights of wondering if I was worth anything, suddenly I had the power. And they absolutely hated it. When the lawyer finally finished, my mom stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. Well, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Oliver, we'll discuss the details at home. You'll come over tonight, won't you? She said it like it was already arranged, like I'd just automatically fall back into their orbit. My father added, yes, we'll get started on a plan. Investments, property management, taxes. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. And Claire, with that same smug little smirk, leaned in close as we walked out. You're lucky, Oliver. If it weren't for us, you'd drown in all this. Don't forget who actually knows what they're doing. I clenched my jaw, my fists tied at my sides. Lucky? No. I wasn't lucky. I was chosen. My grandfather had seen through all of them, and he decided to put everything in my hands. And as much as they wanted to pretend otherwise, they weren't in control anymore. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because I knew deep down this was just the beginning. I left that law office with my head spinning. My grandfather's was clutched like a lifeline. My parents walked out with those brittle, fake smiles, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back. I knew this wasn't the end of their schemes. It was only the start. And I wasn't wrong. That very evening, around 9, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, there stood Claire, looking like she'd just stepped off a runway, her perfume filling my small space. She gave me that familiar smirk and just slipped past me without an invitation. Cute place, she said, glancing around my living room with an exaggerated eyebrow lift. But let's be honest, Oliver, this won't do anymore. You'll need something grander. And guess who can help with that? Me. I closed the door slowly, already exhausted. What do you want, Claire? She plopped onto my couch like she owned it, crossing one leg over the other. Simple. I'm here to make sure you don't embarrass yourself with this inheritance. You've been living small for so long, you don't even realize what you've got. Think about it. Dad knows investments. Mom knows people. And she twirled a strand of hair. I know style. Imagine the three of us helping you. We could turn Grandpa's estate into something bigger, but only if you stop being stubborn. Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they perfectly mirrored every insult my parents had ever thrown at me. Small, stubborn, incompetent. She'd learned the script by heart. I don't need help, I said firmly. Grandpa left it to me. Not you. Not them. Me. Her smile flickered just a bit, but she quickly covered it with a laugh. Oh, Oliver, you really think that? You think Grandpa didn't expect you to lean on the family? You wouldn't even have met with that lawyer if Mom hadn't told you the time. That's when it clicked. She wasn't there to help. She was there to test me, to see if I'd fold. But the real betrayal? That came a week later. I got a call from the lawyer. His tone was clipped, urgent. Oliver, I need to ask, did you authorize any changes to the estate account? My stomach dropped. No. What? There have been attempts to access the funds, he explained. Someone presented themselves at the bank as your representative. Luckily, the bank flagged it because of the stipulations in the will, but they were very insistent, claiming you had verbally authorized it. I knew immediately who it was. My parents. That night, I drove past their house. It looked exactly as I remembered. 2 cars in the driveway, the porch light glowing warmly. The picture of suburban comfort. I sat there in the dark, hands gripping the wheel, watching the home I'd been exiled from. And for the first time, I didn't feel sadness or longing. I felt cold, calculated, because this wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was theft. They were willing to break the law, to forge, to lie, just to strip me of what my grandfather had trusted me with. And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Claire texted me later that night. Don't be naive, Oliver. Money belongs in the hands of people who know how to use it. Be smart or you'll lose it all. I stared at that message for a long, long time, my heart thudding in my chest. That was the moment something snapped. The betrayal wasn't just their attempt to steal from me. It was the crushing realization that they would never see me as anything other than the weak link, the disposable one. They had cut me off at 18, laughed as I scraped by, and now that I finally had something of my own, they wanted to take that, too. I put my phone down and sat in the dark, thinking about my grandfather. I remembered his voice, steady and firm, the way he'd look at me and say, Oliver, don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. You decide that. For years, I hadn't truly believed him. But now, with my parents circling like sharks, I finally understood. That night marked the turning point. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I wasn't just going to protect what was mine. I was going to make them regret ever underestimating me. But I had no idea just how far they'd go next, or how ugly the fight was about to become. The days after the bank incident were some of the darkest I've lived through since the night I was kicked out at 18. At first, I thought I could just ignore their schemes, cut them out, and move on. But that's not how my parents operated. They had this insidious way of clawing into every crack, forcing themselves into places they didn't belong until you felt absolutely suffocated. Strange things started happening. One morning, I found a deep, deliberate scratch carved all along the side of my car. Someone had taken a key and dragged it from bumper to tail light. Later that week, my landlord emailed, saying they'd received multiple anonymous complaints about noise from my apartment. Me? I lived alone. I barely played music, and I worked late most nights. It was obvious. Someone was trying to make trouble. Then came the whispers. My parents still lived in the same town I grew up in, and they had their little circle, the country club set, the church crowd, the neighbors who thrived on gossip. Suddenly, people looked at me differently. The cashier at the grocery store, who used to smile, now just raised her eyebrows when I paid in cash. The woman at the gas station muttered, Must be nice living off an old man's money. I knew exactly where it came from. My parents had begun painting me as the greedy, undeserving grandson who swooped in and stole the family estate. The worst part wasn't even the slander. It was the silence. The few friends I had in town stopped calling. They'd heard the rumors too, and maybe, just maybe, part of them believed it. I'd worked so hard to scrape together a reputation as someone dependable, trustworthy, and now my parents were undoing it all. I hit rock bottom one night. Sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills. Not because I couldn't pay them. I had the funds now, but because I was terrified. Terrified that if I used my grandfather's money too openly, it would just feed their narrative. Terrified that every move I made would be twisted into proof that I wasn't capable. That's when the old doubts crept back in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't strong enough. Maybe I would drown in this inheritance just like they said I would. For hours, I sat there, replaying every insult, every dismissal, every memory of being told I was worthless. It was like I was 18 all over again, sleeping in the backseat of my car, wondering if I'd even make it to the next week. But then, I opened a drawer in the table. Inside was something I'd nearly forgotten, an envelope my grandfather had given me on my 21st birthday. I'd kept it all these years, but I'd never really looked at it again. Inside was a letter, written in his firm, slightly shaky handwriting. It read, "Oliver, if you're reading this, I hope you've learned by now that the world doesn't give you anything it tries to take. Don't let them. You are stronger than you know, and one day you'll have to prove it. When that time comes, don't shrink back. Stand tall. They can only take from you if you hand it to them." I read it over and over until the words burned into my soul. My grandfather had known. He had seen through my parents long before I ever did, and he had trusted me to rise above it. That night, something shifted in me. I was still at rock bottom, lonely, beaten down, overwhelmed. But I started to plan. Quietly, carefully. I began documenting everything. Copies of the bank's report about the attempted account access. Every one of Claire's toxic text messages. Every rumor I heard in town, and where it came from. At work, I stayed late, using the company's public computers to research estate law, trust funds, property management. If they wanted to treat me like I was incapable, I was going to become the most capable person in the room. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I just smiled when people sneered, stayed calm when my parents sent their little barbs, and acted like I was backing down. All the while, I was building something, quietly, beneath the surface. It was lonely. It was painful. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over an endless drop. But there was a strange power in that silence. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And I had this distinct, unshakable feeling that my grandfather would have been proud. I didn't know when, or how, but I swore to myself that the day would come when the balance shifted. When I'd stop being the target and start being the one holding the strings. I just didn't realize how quickly that opportunity would arrive, or how brutally my parents would try to force my hand. The shift didn't happen overnight, but once it began, it felt unstoppable. Like a tide finally turning in my favor after years of being dragged under. I kept my head down, worked long hours, and poured myself into learning everything I could about handling wealth responsibly. It wasn't really about the money itself anymore. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't the helpless child my parents had always claimed. The first real turning point came when I hired a financial advisor. Not some flashy guy from my parents' world, but a quiet, meticulous man named Richard, recommended by a coworker. He wasn't impressed by the size of the estate, and he didn't treat me like a child. He sat across from me, yellow legal pad in hand, asked careful questions, and listened without judgment. By the end of our first meeting, he handed me a simple, solid plan, diversified investments, taxes covered, long-term security. "You're more than capable," he told me as we shook hands. "You just needed someone to confirm it." Those words lit something inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just clinging to my grandfather's gift out of fear. I was building on it. I used part of the estate to buy a modest home in a quieter part of town. Nothing ostentatious, nothing my parents could sneer at. But it was mine. Walking through those empty rooms the first night, I just stood in the middle of the living room and let the silence wash over me. No one could throw me out of this place. No one could tell me I didn't belong. The keys in my pocket were proof that I had finally carved out something real. At work, things started to change too. I'd been just another name on the payroll, but with my grandfather's letter echoing in my mind, I pushed harder. Volunteered for projects, stayed late, delivered more than anyone expected. Slowly, people began to notice. A promotion came. Small, but significant. My boss told me, "You've got leadership in you, Oliver. You just need to believe it yourself." I didn't broadcast any of this. I knew better than to let my parents catch wind of how well things were going. But inevitably, word trickled out. Small-town gossip has a way of circling back. Soon, I started hearing whispers that only fueled me more. "He bought a house. He's got a new job title. Maybe Harold knew what he was doing after all." The nasty rumors my parents had spread were starting to crack, replaced by something else. Respect, even if it was grudging. And that respect? It terrified my parents more than anything. One evening, Claire showed up at my new house, uninvited. I didn't let her pass the porch. She stood there in heels, arms folded, her expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. "Nice place," she said flatly. "Did you decorate it yourself? Or did you finally get someone to hold your hand?" I didn't bite. I just leaned against the door frame. "I'm doing fine, Claire. Better than fine." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't get cocky, Oliver. You think one house and a job promotion means you've won? Dad's already looking into ways, too." She stopped herself, biting her lip. But I caught it. Dad's already looking into ways to what? Regain control? Undermine me? It didn't matter. I knew they hadn't given up. And that's when I realized my rise wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about positioning. Every step forward was leverage. Every success was a weapon they couldn't take from me. I started aligning myself with people outside my family's toxic reach. I joined a local charity board, in my grandfather's name, honoring the work he'd quietly done for years. I worked with people who remembered his integrity and generosity. With each handshake, each connection, I was weaving a net of support around myself, one my parents couldn't break with gossip alone. Inside, I was still cautious, still carried the scars of those early years. But for the first time, I felt a quiet confidence building. My parents had expected me to stumble, to drown in responsibility. Instead, I was learning to swim in deeper waters than they ever imagined. Still, I kept my preparations hidden. I knew the storm wasn't over. If anything, it was gathering. And when it broke, I wanted to be ready. Because I could feel it coming. My parents weren't the type to accept defeat quietly. They tried manipulation. They tried theft. They tried slander. None of it had truly worked. The next move, I knew, would be bigger, more desperate. And when it came, I had to be in a position not just to defend myself, but to strike back. The ultimate setup came almost by accident. Though in hindsight, it felt like my grandfather's hand guiding me, even years after his passing. I'd been attending more of those charity board meetings, the ones I joined in his honor. And it was at one of these gatherings that I met Daniel Grant. He was in his late 50s, a retired attorney with sharp eyes, and the kind of calm presence that made you lean in when he spoke. He'd known my grandfather personally. They played chess every Thursday night for nearly a decade. When he found out who I was, his expression softened. "Harold was a rare man," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I hope you know how proud he was of you." Something about the way he said it felt different, almost conspiratorial. Over coffee later that week, he leaned across the table and lowered his voice. "You should be careful. Your grandfather, he anticipated there might be trouble after he passed. He put certain protections in place." I froze. "Protections? What kind?" Daniel smiled faintly. "That's something we can talk about more formally. But let's just say Harold wasn't blind to your parents' nature. He made sure the estate would be safeguarded in ways they wouldn't expect. If they overstep, it won't just be morally wrong. It'll be legally disastrous for them." For the first time, I realized I wasn't just playing defense. I had ammunition. Over the next few weeks, Daniel helped me understand exactly what my grandfather had done. The estate wasn't just a lump sum of money. It was structured carefully. Deeds, shares and properties, even a trust specifically for philanthropic projects in my name. But more importantly, there were clauses. Ironclad stipulations that explicitly disinherited my parents if they attempted to interfere or present themselves as representatives. My grandfather had written it all down, signed and notarized, as if he knew they would try to take what wasn't theirs. As Daniel laid it all out, piece by piece, I felt something shift inside me again. All those years, I thought I was alone, powerless, scrambling to survive. It turned out my grandfather had been planning for this exact moment. He had seen the storm brewing, and he had left me not only the resources to withstand it, but the leverage to fight back. Meanwhile, my parents grew bolder. I started getting letters in the mail. Formal-looking envelopes with their names typed neatly at the bottom. Proposals for how I should allocate the inheritance. One suggested putting Claire on the payroll as a family liaison. Another recommended selling off the estate properties to avoid management headaches and, of course, funneling the proceeds into trusted family accounts. I didn't respond to any of them, but I kept each letter, filed neatly in a folder, just like Daniel advised. "Paper trails are powerful," he told me. "Every word they put in writing is another rope they're tying around their own throats." At the same time, I was climbing higher in my own right. Work recognized me again, this time with a significant promotion that came with more authority and a seat at the table during strategy meetings. Suddenly, people who had once overlooked me were asking for my opinion, nodding when I spoke. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect. Real respect earned through persistence and competence. And with respect came allies. The more people saw me stepping into my own, the more they quietly pushed back against the rumors my parents had seeded. At community events, I'd overhear comments like, "Oliver's really turned out well. You can tell Harold raised him right." Every little remark chipped away at the false image my parents had tried to build. The best part? They didn't know. They had no idea that while they were scheming behind closed doors, I was gathering allies, documents, and quiet influence. They thought I was still that boy they'd tossed out with nothing but a backpack. They thought I'd cave, hand over the reins, and thank them for it. But I wasn't that boy anymore. I was a man with power. Power they couldn't see coming. And then came the moment that tied everything together. One evening, Daniel handed me a small, leather-bound notebook worn at the edges. "Your grandfather asked me to hold on to this until I felt you were ready," he said. Inside were pages of my grandfather's handwriting, notes, reflections, and at the back, a detailed outline of how to counter every single move he predicted my parents might make. He hadn't just left me money. He had left me a playbook. As I closed the notebook, my hands trembling, I realized something with bone-deep certainty. The time for simply surviving was over. I wasn't just going to defend what was mine. I was going to set the stage so that when my parents inevitably made their next move, I'd be ready to crush it completely. They wanted to play games with me. They had no idea I was already holding the winning hand. The breaking point came faster than I ever expected. My parents had been circling for months, sending letters, hinting through neighbors, making snide remarks whenever we crossed paths. But when they finally made their move, they went big. Too big. One crisp autumn morning, I got a call from Daniel. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it I hadn't heard before. "Oliver, your parents filed a petition with the court this morning. They're claiming you're unfit to manage the estate, and they're requesting guardianship of the assets." Guardianship? They were actually trying to have me declared incompetent at 27 years old. After everything I had built for myself, I almost laughed. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. But then the sting hit. This wasn't just another attempt to manipulate me behind closed doors. This was public. This was them dragging my name through the mud, trying to brand me as incapable in front of the entire community. And that was their mistake. Daniel and I had been preparing for months, quietly collecting every scrap of evidence of their interference. The attempted bank access, the manipulative letters, the rumors they'd spread, the ironclad stipulations my grandfather had laid out with surgical precision. Piece by piece, we had built a case so airtight it practically glowed. The court date arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. I walked into that courtroom in a simple suit, no entourage, no theatrics. My parents were already seated, flanking Claire like loyal, arrogant soldiers. They looked smug, confident, as though the outcome was already sealed. My mother even had the nerve to smile at me, her expression syrupy sweet, like she was forgiving me for forcing this spectacle. But when the judge called us to order and my parents' attorney began his opening statement, the cracks showed immediately. He'd painted me as irresponsible, emotionally unstable, someone prone to financial recklessness. He cited my lack of experience and my modest background. Claire nodded dramatically at each point, playing her role to perfection. And then it was our turn. Daniel rose slowly, his presence commanding without needing to raise his voice. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a question of competence, but of greed." He began laying out the documents, one after another. The forged attempt at the bank, the manipulative letters they sent, Claire's text messages, dripping with condescension, the stipulations in the will that explicitly disinherited my parents if they so much as attempted to interfere. The courtroom grew quieter with each piece of evidence. My parents shifted uncomfortably, their smugness slipping away. Claire's jaw tightened, her arms folded across her chest. And then came the final blow. Daniel held up the leather-bound notebook my grandfather had left me. "Mr. Montgomery anticipated this very situation. In his own handwriting, he described his concerns about his son and daughter-in-law's history of manipulation. He wrote, and I quote, 'If they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Oliver.'" The words echoed in the courtroom like a gavel strike. I saw my mother's face turn pale, my father's fists clench, Claire's eyes dart to the floor. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was crisp and final. "The petition is denied. The estate will remain solely in Oliver Montgomery's control. Furthermore, this court cautions the petitioners against any further attempts to undermine the explicit wishes of the deceased. This matter is closed." It was over in less than an hour, but the fallout was instant. My parents' attempt to seize control had not only failed, it had publicly exposed them for exactly what they were: manipulative, greedy, desperate. As we left the courtroom, my mother tried one last time. She reached out, her voice trembling with false warmth. "Oliver, sweetheart, we only did this for you. You don't understand how much pressure this is. Let us—" I stopped. I looked at her with a calm I hadn't possessed my entire life. "No," I said simply. "You did it for yourselves. Grandpa knew it. And now everyone else does too. Her hand froze in the air, then dropped to her side. My father muttered something under his breath, but he couldn't even meet my eyes. Claire stormed ahead, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. I walked out of that courthouse with the weight of years lifted from my shoulders. Not only had I defended my grandfather's trust, but I'd done it with a calm confidence they never expected from me. They had underestimated me every step of the way, and in the end, their own arrogance had undone them. But this was only the beginning of their reckoning. Because while the courtroom had settled the legal battle, the real fallout, the social, the personal, the irreversible, was still waiting, just around the corner. The weeks after that court hearing were like watching dominoes fall, one after another, in slow motion. My parents had walked into that courtroom believing they'd win, believing they could bend the world the same way they'd bent me when I was young. But the judge's ruling did more than deny their petition. It stripped away the illusion they'd built for decades. And once that mask slipped, the whole town started to see them differently. It started small. My mom's circle of friends at the country club, the ones she'd spent years gossiping with, began to distance themselves. Where she'd once been the center of attention, now conversation stopped when she walked into a room. One woman even told me quietly, "We had no idea how badly they treated you, Oliver. I'm so sorry." My mom tried to keep up appearances, but the icy smiles and hushed whispers made it clear her reputation was collapsing. My father fared no better. His company heard about the hearing. Small towns have a way of carrying stories into every corner, you know? Suddenly, his financial expertise wasn't such an asset anymore. Clients grew weary. Meetings were canceled. And eventually, word spread that he'd been asked to take an early retirement. For a man whose entire identity was tied to his career, the humiliation was devastating. And Claire, oh Claire, her fall was the sharpest of all. She had built her entire social status on being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who mocked me while being showered with gifts. But after the hearing, people saw her for what she really was. At parties, she was no longer the center of attention. She was just the girl who tried to steal from her own brother and failed. Her boyfriend left her not long after, and I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved back in with my parents. The three of them, under one roof again, feeding off each other's bitterness like a slow poison. Meanwhile, my own life expanded in ways I hadn't imagined. The estate wasn't just money, it was opportunity. I invested in myself, in projects my grandfather would have been so proud of. The charity board grew into something larger, and I found myself stepping into leadership roles where my voice truly mattered. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the disappointment. I was someone people respected. But the most powerful moment came one evening when I drove past my parents' house. The same house I'd been thrown out of at 18 with nothing but a backpack. The porch light was on, but the lawn was unkempt. The shutters needed paint. The house looked tired, worn down, almost exactly like the people inside it. I parked across the street for a while, just watching. Memories washed over me. The night of my exile. The years of mockery. The endless comparisons to Claire. For so long, this place had represented my failure, my shame. But now, looking at it, I felt nothing but clarity. They hadn't destroyed me. They had forged me. Every insult, every dismissal, every cruel word had built the unbreakable resolve I carried now. And then it hit me. The revenge was complete. Not because I had humiliated them in court. Not because they'd lost their standing. But because I no longer needed their approval. Their power over me was gone. Entirely. I rolled down my window, letting the cool night air in, and whispered to myself words I'd never dared say before. Grandpa was right. I decide what I'm worth. With that, I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving that house and everything it represented behind me. They had tried to cut me out of their lives. In the end, I cut them out of mine.